Let's talk about hoodoo and voodoo. There are a lot of misconceptions. A lot of people believe that hoodoo and voodoo are the same thing. There's a lot of misleading information, especially on the internet, about the difference between the two. Living here in New Orleans, you see voodoo posted on everything. You see hoodoo posted on everything. So I understand why people can sometimes use them interchangeably, but I assure you that hoodoo is different than voodoo. We're going to talk about what hoodoo is, what voodoo is, and the difference between the two. A little disclaimer before we get into it: I am not an initiate of voodoo. I have a lot of experience around it, but I am not an initiate, so all you initiates, calm down. We're not going to be talking about that from your perspective. We're going to be talking about it from the hoodoo perspective. Hoodoo is an ancestrally based practice. It's a result of the transatlantic slave trade. It is African American folk magic. When you are in an African American house that has hoodoo or rootwork in their bloodline, you're not going to hear the words conjure or rootwork or hoodoo. At least in my family, I never heard those words, even though I do have it in my bloodline. The reason why is because it's so ingrained in the culture. It's not different from their spiritual practice. I grew up in the Baptist Christian household like many African Americans did, like many root workers and hoodoo practitioners have, and my grandmother carried her Bible and she had her tricks. And before we went to church, she would sit us down at the dining room table and talk about herbs and roots so that we had an understanding that these things had power. And it's not like she separated it and said, now we're going to have a class about hoodoo. That's not what happened. She told us this is where the power is and this is how you can capitalize on that power. You have to understand that hoodoo came from a culture of survival. The people who were stolen from their country, stolen from their homes and brought over here, held tightly on to their spiritual practice. That was the only thing that they owned. And so it was very special to them. They had to keep it secret. Hoodoo is not something that was widely shared. And to this day, there's a lot of information that's kept hidden. A lot of the ways I practice that a lot of hoodoo practitioners practice is secret. You drop things in secret locations. You work at night so no one sees that you're working. You could be working right in front of someone's face, and you have to be able to keep that from them. You don't want people stealing your power by seeing it. Hoodoo relies a lot on our ancestors. It's a powerful practice because we remember those who've come before us, those who were the trailblazers, those who are the foundation on which we stand, the blood, sweat, and the tears that were sacrificed for our very existence. That's what hoodoo truly is, and that's where the power truly comes from. Your relationship with your living relatives and your relationship with your ancestors keeps your back straight and keeps you strong like they were strong to survive. That power comes through us and into the work. And when I say us, I do mean African Americans because it is a result of the transatlantic slave trade. So now we're going to talk a little bit about voodoo. You're going to see voodoo everywhere. Just a quick Google search and you're going to see the word voodoo. You're going to see it spelled a few different ways, and the spelling of voodoo can give you some insight into what type of voodoo they're talking about. Here in New Orleans, there's New Orleans voodoo. There is the popular mass consumption voodoo, which is spelled Voodoo, and even in old documents, people who were observing it from the outside would use voodoo to explain it. So from very early on, these two words were used interchangeably. But when the word voodoo is spelled Vodou, it's talking about a religion. It's talking about a whole religious practice which involves the Loa. There's Haitian voodoo, which comes from Port-au-Prince. It comes from parts of Haiti, and it has a whole way of practicing it itself. But it is not hoodoo. Hoodoo does not use the Loa, even though in a lot of expressions of hoodoo, you'll see them mixing it with the Loa, you'll see them mixing it with Orisha, and that is not the original expression of hoodoo. Through time, hoodoo has communicated with a lot of different cultures. It's communicated with indigenous people who were here. It's communicated with Native Americans and even Europeans. And along the way, it's taken little tricks. It's learned how to evolve and adapt to its environment, much like a culture that's trying to survive. On the other hand, Voodoo is still very much practiced, especially here in New Orleans. There are voodoo fetes and parties, and it teaches veneration and honoring of the Loa. Hoodoo does not teach veneration of the Loa or the Orisha. It teaches veneration of your ancestors. And yes, there are saints that are venerated as well, but that ties back into the very Christian background of Hoodoo. So it's still a part of it, although these other deities are not. When you are on a search for Hoodoo, try to make the difference between Hoodoo and Voodoo. You want to really know what you're looking at. Voodoo is not Hoodoo. If you see it spelled Voodoo, it might be a place that is using it interchangeably or using the popular understanding of it, and that's okay. Over time, it's just taken on a certain connotation, and we accept it, that some people are going to call it Voodoo, and because Hoodoo is spelled very similar, Hoodoo. It makes sense, and so that's not something that I personally take offense about. But when you are a serious practitioner, you have to know the difference. Hoodoo is a result of the transatlantic slave trade, and Voodoo is not. It is a practice that you can find here in the States, but I'm most familiar with Haitian Voodoo, and in my time here in New Orleans, I've become familiar with New Orleans Voodoo. But if you are on a journey to find Voodoo, make sure that that is the direction that you're going in. If you are looking for Hoodoo, make sure that is the direction you're going in. When you become serious about these practices, you definitely want to understand the history of both of them very clearly, what makes them different, and I'm doing my part to clear that up just a little bit for you. Until next time, guys, I am the owner of Crescent City Conjure. My name is Sinalize. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe to it, and should be a little notification bell if you want further videos, and hopefully this misconception between the two will eventually clear out, or you'll have a little information regarding it. Bye.